Hi all my art friends, this is Dawn from Painted Willow Art. I have got another paint along video for you today. We're going to use basically the same supplies that we often do with just a couple of changes because I want to try some new things today just to see how they work. I've got my glass cutting board. The paper that I'm using is a Strathmore 400 acrylic paper. It's got a little bit of a texture on it, hopefully you can see that I quite like. I was gonna try the Strathmore 500 heavyweight mixed media paper today. It's 350 pounds, and I thought that might be kind of interesting to see how that does with the buckling and warping that the water creates. And I actually started this video using that, and it was terrible for watercolor. So I'm starting over. The reason it was so terrible for watercolor is because it absorbed the water too quickly, so it wouldn't let the paints flow together nicely. But what I am going to do differently is use a different tape. Normally I use my washi tape, but today I'm going to use wall-safe Scotch tape. And the reason I'm using this is because I was watching another artist and she was using it and it peeled off the paper so nicely. It didn't rip the paper like washi tape and painter's tape and things like that can often do. So I don't know how it's going to do with watercolors. She was using it with acrylic paints, but I am going to try it out and see what we get. So I'm going to tape my paper down with that. The other things we're going to use for this are our normal supplies. We're going to use watercolors. Whichever watercolors you have are fine. I am actually not using the Josie Lewis set that I usually use because I did get some new paints and I want to try them out. So I will be using some Daniel Smith watercolors. They're a little bit higher end watercolor. A lot of professional artists use them and I hear people talk about them and I'm just kind of curious. So I got myself a small set of them. And I'm going to try them out and see what I think and let you know at the same time. So on this corner down here, I didn't tear my tape quite long enough, so I'm just patching it with another little piece of tape. I've got my pencil and eraser like I normally do. So we can draw our design on here first. Oops. Rock the camera, sorry. I made myself this handy dandy camera stand to hopefully avoid that issue when I'm erasing. So hang around till the end of the video, I'll show you my handy dandy camera stand. So pencil and eraser for drawing, black Sharpie for embellishments at the end, and I usually use a white Signo gel pen, but I found a different white pen and I'm going to try that one today and see how it does. I have this set of silver and gold pens. They're Pentel Sparkle Pops. I found these at the grocery store and they're really sparkly gold and silver pens and I absolutely love them. So when I was at the grocery store the other day, I happened across a Pentel Milky Pop white pen and I love that silver and gold so much. I'm really curious to see how the white one does. So I'm going to use that one today. Whatever white pen you have is fine. If you don't have a white pen, you could use a white colored pencil or a white crayon. I might actually go dig out a white crayon and use that a little bit too, because that will give us some interesting texture in the drawing. So today we're going to do an elephant. I've had lots of requests for an elephant. We're going to do it in the whimsical style. So again, we're not worried about this elephant being realistic. It's going to look kind of fun and funky when we're done. And I'm going to show you an easy way to draw this elephant. So I'm going to start up from the bottom of my page just a little bit because I want to have a line for the ground. So if it helps you, draw a little line across your paper. That's going to be your ground line. So its feet will come down to that ground line. Okay? I'm going to do my elephant on this side of my paper so that his body's over here and the trunk is going to come this way. If it feels more comfortable for you to put the body on this side and do the trunk this way, you can certainly do that. You'll just do what I'm doing in reverse. Okay? So I want the body to be over here. Elephants have a pretty big body. So to do that, I'm going to draw a great big upside down U, and I'm going to make it about that wide. Okay, so I'm just going to start at the ground line and draw me a big upside down U. So that's going to be, let me do that a little darker so you guys can see it. So that's going to be the foundation of the body of my elephant. I want to divide this bottom part into 4 pieces for the legs. The easiest way to do that is to give myself some little markers. So I'm just going to make a little light line right in the middle, a little light line right in the middle of that, and a little light line in the middle between those two. So one in the middle, and then one halfway between the middle and the side, and another one halfway between the middle and the side. So that's where I'm going to do my legs. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see the legs. Do you see how my lines are? Now, I want to bring my legs up maybe to about here, so I can give myself a couple little marks so that I know how high I'm bringing the legs. Elephants tend to be more body than leg, or they look like they're more body than leg, so I'm not going to give it really long legs. And what I'm going to do is kind of round off the bottom at my ground line, bring it across. I'm not going to go all the way to my marker line. I'm going to come just this side of it a little bit. So I'm going to round off the bottom, follow my ground line, round it up, come up to my line, round it down. So you can see what I did there. That line's my marker. I'm not coming quite to it on either side, and I'm going up and around it. And I'm going to continue that same thing all the way across for all 4 legs. So this elephant is not going to look correct in terms of distance in 3D. And I'm completely okay with that because it's whimsical. So there we go. Almost looks more like an octopus that's got squared off legs, right? Okay. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to erase my little marker lines. I'm going to zoom you back out. We'll do the head and the trunk. So that's the main portion of my elephant body. I want my trunk to come off over here. And I'm gonna kind of exaggerate the trunk because we're doing whimsical. I'm gonna make the trunk a little longer than it normally would be. So I'm gonna make the bottom line of the trunk first because I want it to come down and kind of touch this ground line. To do that, I'm gonna come off this side of the body line just a little bit higher up than my legs. And I'm gonna kind of round it off my body line and bring it down, round it, up. So that's the bottom line of my trunk. For the top line of my trunk, I'm going to come off the top of here and I'm going to draw out, not following this contour. I'm going to bring it out and then start to bring it down. Because their trunks are wider at the top, they get narrower towards the end. So I'm going to start bringing it down and making that trunk narrower and narrower and narrower out to the end. And I'm gonna, with that line, I'm gonna extend it out past the top one just a little bit, and I'll show you why in a second, okay? So I'm going to actually turn my paper a little bit. If it's easier for you, turn your paper so you've got a good drawing angle. I'm gonna come off of here, bring it out a little bit, and then start bringing it down towards the rest of my trunk, like that. Okay? Now, on the end of our trunk, where these 2 lines are uneven, I want you to bring that top one down to meet the bottom one, and then curl it around a little bit. And what that's going to do is let us make it look like it's actually holding something. We're going to put some flowers over here, and that'll make it look like that trunk is wrapped around the flower stems. Okay, so while we're here and zoomed in on that area, let's put our flowers in here. They're going to be some funky little flowers, and we're going to start them with an oval at the bottom, a smaller oval on top of that, and a circle on top. We're going to do another one over here. If they're different sizes, that's completely okay. Bigger oval, medium oval, circle. And then I'm going to put one more right here in the middle, like that. And when we do the stems, we're going to bring the stems down to meet the top trunk, and then we'll pick them up here so it will look like that trunk is actually wrapped around them. But we'll do the stems at the end with the pen. Okay, so let's zoom us back out. Now I'm going to come in and erase this line because I don't need that there. That was just part of creating my body and creating a landmark line for the head. So we do that, all of a sudden it's more elephant looking. Now, the ears are large on an elephant, so I want the ears to take up about the middle third of the body. If it helps, make yourself a couple little marker lines. So I've got like a third of the body, a third of the body, a third of the body, and my ear is going to go in this part. And my ear, turn you here. My ear is going to be a great big C. So I'm going to start it down in the body a little bit. I'm going to come up above the body line. And just make a great big C. And now I will go in and erase my marker lines and the top line of the body. Okay. I do need to give him another ear on the other side, so I'm just going to make kind of a curved line going from the ear down to the top of the head. See what we got there? And then its eyeball is going to be right here, so I'm just going to draw an O. About that big. About the size of a quarter. Depends on how big your elephant is. If you're starting with a 9x12 paper and you've done your elephant large like I have, about the size of a quarter. Now, I'm noticing as I'm looking at this that I followed the ground line with his trunk, and I don't want it to look kind of squared off like that. So I'm going to erase this part, and I'm going to come back and just kind of round off his trunk. My ground line is still right about here, so it's going to look like the trunk is below the ground line, but that's going to add to the illusion of depth. So I just rounded off my trunk, and there we go. So that's the basis of my elephant. Now before I actually start painting, I'm going to come in and erase these lines just so there's just a little shadow of them left is all. I think we talk about this in every video, but I will keep saying it because new people watch the videos all the time. The reason we're doing this is because, those of you at home who already know, say it with me. If we paint watercolor over these lines and we decide we need to erase them later, we are not going to be able to erase them out from under the watercolor. So I'm just taking my eraser and lightly going over the lines so that all I have left is just kind of a ghost of the lines. I can see them enough to follow them to paint, but they're not really dark. Now, the lines that we made for this elephant, we are going to be outlining with pen, so we're going to be able to cover up some of it as well. But I still like to go through and erase these lines in case I change my mind and I decide to kind of wander off script a little bit while I'm painting. Those lines are erased and out of the way, and I know that they're not going to give me a problem if I paint over them. So you can see there's just a little hint of those lines left is all. Nothing major. Okay? So now, my friends, we paint. We paint, we paint. What I'm going to do is paint this whole elephant in water first, plain clear water, because I want him to be multiple colored. And I want to kind of start at one side and move my way across, but I want the paints to blend nicely where they meet each other. And I'm going to do kind of a blue over here and go to a yellow, because I know if the blue and yellow mix, they're going to make green, and so it'll be a nice color in between. From the yellow, I'm going to go to pink. I know the yellow and pink will mix to make orange, so I know those two will be okay. And then from the pink, I'm going to go into a purple to finish off the trunk. Okay, so plain water first. We're going to cover the whole thing except its eyeball. Leave its eyeball dry, because I want the eyeball to be white. I don't want the paint to bleed into it, and if it's wet, where I get paint right up next to it, it's going to bleed over right into that eyeball, and I do not want that. So I'm just taking plain, clean water, brushing it on my paper. You don't have to be real exact with it. You almost have to do this a little bit quickly, because it does soak into the paper and it does start to dry. So I think I might, because of the size I'm working with, I think I might kind of stop painting my water right about here. And I'll come back and do from here over when I get to that point, because by the time I get to it, it's going to dry anyway. If I was doing much smaller, I could go ahead and do the whole elephant, but I think I'm just going to stop right here. If you start to notice some spots have dried, go back and hit them again real quick. Get it nice and wet so that all of these colors will just kind of mix and mingle together. Now, when I say nice and wet, I mean that you might have to kind of look at your paper from a different angle so you can see where the wet is. We don't want it puddled. We don't want it dripping. We just want a nice shiny sheen on the paper. So there you can see there's no puddles, there's no dripping. If I tip it, it's not going anywhere. But there's just a nice shiny sheen where I've painted that. So I am going to come in now with my paints. I'm going to grab a blue. This is kind of a turquoisey blue. I'm going straight from my palette. These colors are pretty bold, so I am imagining this is going to go on really dark to begin with. Wow! But that's okay, because I'm going to blend it out into the yellow with that much pigmentation in the paint. I don't need to go back and dip my brush again. I'm just going to follow the contour of the elephant, bring it across the bottom for his foot and his leg, and just kind of drag that paint over a bit. Now, I think with mine, I'm not going to take that blue quite over into the ear. It is going to overlap into the ear a little bit, but I'm going to let the water do that naturally. I'm not going to spread the blue any further than that. I will bring a little bit down into this leg, though. Now, I also want to mention, I'm starting on the left side of my elephant and working right, because I'm right-handed. By doing this, I'm not putting my hand in what I've already painted. If I started over here and worked this way, I would have to worry about not dragging my hand through that paint, and I am notorious for dragging my hand through wet paint. So I'm starting on my off side, working towards my hand. If you're left-handed, start on the right side and work your way left, okay? It just makes it much easier so that you are not having to deal with, holy cow, you're not having to deal with putting your hand in wet paint. What I holy cowed is I thought I rinsed my brush off good. I don't know if you can see it, but that blue was so intense. Even though I rinsed my brush really good, I stuck it in the yellow and got a little bit of blue in it. So to fix that, I'm just going to put a little bit of water in there, drag that brush across it, and wipe it on another piece of paper, and then rinse my brush again. So in doing that, my elephant dried out a little bit, so I'm going to come back with just a little bit of plain water. Make sure he's still wet so that my colors will merge nicely. Skipping the eyeball, remember. and I'm going to come straight in with my yellow. I'm going to start off the blue just a little bit. So I'm going to start over in here because I want to maintain that nice vibrant yellow for just a little bit. So I'm going to put the yellow in, and then I'm going to work it back towards the blue. And when I get to the blue, I'm just going to kind of swipe back and forth a little bit. Doing this, you might need to rinse your brush and come back with just a clean wet brush and drag that yellow over. And so I'm just dragging the yellow towards the blue and kind of scrubbing back and forth where they meet. Rinse my brush off when I think I need to, but still leaving it a little bit wet. And just kind of going back and forth, dragging those colors together. Because it's still wet, they're going to kind of naturally want to just merge together. So, yep, nobody's getting real runny. So I'm just going to kind of play around with that a little bit until I'm happy with how those colors look, that I don't have any real sharp, definitive lines. They just kind of merge into each other. Now this has started to get dry over here, and I didn't come down in here. So before I do anything else, I'm going to come back with just plain water and wet some more of the elephant, particularly keeping that yellow line wet so I don't end up with a hard solid line there that it's hard to go back and blend later. And I'm going to come down into the trunk a bit. Make sure his leg's wet. So in the watercolor world, this is called a wet on wet technique because my paper is wet and then my paint is wet. So I'm grabbing some pink, and again, I'm going to start off the yellow a little bit because I want to maintain the vibrancy of the pink. I'm going to make sure this line stays wet because that's where it will blend with the purple. I'm going to have to grab some more pink because that pink is not a pink that I've used before. And I'm finding that it washes itself out pretty good, which is fine. Sometimes you want it to do that, but I want these colors to be nice and vibrant. So I'm just picking up some more pink here and there so I've got nice, a good amount of color going on. I'm gonna go up here and get his ear. And then just like I did with the blue and the yellow, I'm gonna kind of work the pink back towards the yellow. Rinse your brush off if you need to. By rinsing it off and coming back with just a wet brush to do this, you're taking less chance of muddying that paint too much. You're just letting it blend nicely. I'm going to come up here and do the same thing. Just going to kind of mush them together. And this pink and the yellow are making kind of a light orange color, which is kind of cool. And as I'm looking at this as I'm going, I'm not really liking the stiff definition between the colors. So I'm going to come in and just drop a little bit more pink over here and run that around. Put some more pink up here. Run that around. Maybe even run the pink over into my blue a little bit. You may need to dry your brush off here and there as you're doing this. Sometimes, you know, cleaning it over and over again and just coming back with a wet brush, you can get too much water on it. So if it starts to feel like things are buckling and warping too much, rinse your brush off and then dry it off like on a paper towel. I have a bad habit of doing this, but that works too. Okay. Now I'm going to come down and wet the trunk. Make sure my line right there is wet. and let the rest of that trunk. Okay, in with the purple. So before I get too far down the trunk, I am going to rinse my brush off and dry it just a little bit and come back up here and kind of smush these colors around a little bit so that they start to merge together so we get a nice transition there. And then I'm just going to finish off the trunk with my purple. So we get that all filled in. So I haven't used a ton of purple paint because I know this purple's kind of dark. And if you want it really dark, you know, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But I didn't want it too terribly dark. But I think what I am going to do is come back with just a little more of the purple paint. And I just dabbed my brush real lightly in my paint pan. And I'm just kind of dabbing it on this lower part of the trunk. So remember I said we're going to make it look like it's wrapping around. The underside would have a shadow on it. So the underside would be a little bit darker. So on this what's going to be the underside of the trunk, I'm just going to tap some more purple in there. So when it dries, it's going to be just a tad bit darker there. So with all of our paint done, we need to dry this. Oops, wait, rewind. We need to paint our flowers real quick. And I think I'm going to do these flowers in maybe that same turquoise blue, just because I really quite like it. It's very vibrant, so I don't need a ton of it. But I'm going to come paint my little flower ovals. Back here, let's zoom in a little bit so you can see. I'm going to come paint my little flower ovals with my blue. You can choose whatever color you would like your flowers to be. If you want them all three to be different colors, you could certainly do that. Because we're doing whimsical, if you wanted each layer to be a different color, you could do that as well. Because this is watercolor, if you want to maintain the integrity of your layers, if you do your layers different colors, you would need to do one layer, then let it dry, then do the other layer, then let it dry. Otherwise, if you do them when they're wet like this, they're just all going to run together, which, you know, that might be an interesting look too. There's really not a concrete right way to do this. It just depends on how you want your colors to look. If you want to maintain the integrity of them, you need to dry them in between. Now you'll notice I haven't gone back to my paint pan for paint here. I'm just kind of picking up some of this wet blue on these other two and moving it around. And I'm picking it up by just running my brush through the paint. I don't want these to be really dark because I want to be able to see the lines we're going to put in them with the markers. So I'm just using some of that existing paint, running my brush through it to pick it up and pull it over. And by doing that, they each get a little bit lighter as I go, as I'm moving that paint around. So with a very little bit of paint, I can do all three of those flowers. Okay, there we go. Whoops. So at this point, we're going to go dry these. So I'm going to pause the video and go hit mine with a blow dryer. If you have a blow dryer, do the same with yours. If you don't have a blow dryer, set it aside for 15-20 minutes and let it dry, okay? I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, my little elephant is dry. And I don't care for this area. it feels like it's too washed out. I don't know, there's something I don't like about the colors in this area. So I want to show you what you can do with this sometimes when you have an area like that that you don't like. It just looks washed out to me, and I want it to be more vibrant. It doesn't quite match with these sides. So what I'm gonna do is put another layer on here. So I'm gonna come in with just plain water and get this wet again. Now, if you decide to do this, you can also do this just to make your colors more vibrant across the board. If they've gone on kind of pale, you've done a real thin layer and you want them brighter, you can do this same thing. You're just gonna get it wet again with a little bit of water. Again, we don't want it sopping wet, and you don't want to scrub it really hard, because if you scrub it really hard, it's going to start taking paint off. And I'm just going to get my whole little guy wet again, because I might put a little more of this kind of bluey teal turquoisey color on too. But I also want it to be able to blend where I'm going to do the yellow. So I'm going to get it wet again, and I'm going to come back in with more yellow. And let that yellow blend into the blue. A little more yellow still. Blend into the blue. Because I want that to be a whole lot brighter. So I'm just putting a second coat on. And put a little more here. And I'm cleaning my brush in between so that I can come back and kind of blend those colors a little bit. And then I'm going to grab some more pink and put some more pink here, because same thing, it's feeling washed out, and I don't want it washed out. I want it really bright and vibrant. And I think part of the problem with this is that the water has buckled the paper right there, so it's wanting to run to both sides. So what I'm going to do with this to try and prevent that from happening again is kind of drag all the paint up on top of the hump so that it starts out up there. I'm going to rinse my brush, dry it off on my sleeve, and then come back and just kind of mush it around a little bit. Now I'm going to go dry this again. And when I do, I'm actually going to take my paper and kind of do this a little bit while I'm drying it to try and keep that paint up on that hump. Okay, so I'm going to go dry and I will be right back. Okay, back. Elephant's dry, much happier with that now. It's got more color, it doesn't look all washed out. So the last thing we need to do with watercolors before we start embellishing is put our grass in down below, or our ground line. You could make it maybe tan or a light brown if you wanted your elephant to be standing on sand. I kind of want my elephant on grass. So I'm going to use some green down here. And I'm just going straight from my pan and just plopping in some green here and there. Let it be different shades, be different color, different darkness or lightness shade here and there. And bring it up kind of around the feet a little bit so that it looks like the elephant's actually standing on it, not on top of a two-dimensional surface. Now, be careful going around your other colors that you're not scrubbing that wet paint into the other colors too much, because watercolor re-wets. So if I scrubbed too hard, right on the edge of that pink, I can get that pink wet again and it will bleed down into the green, and I don't really want that. So we're just going to continue putting some green all across the bottom, and come back and dot some darker green in here and there. Just gives you a little bit of depth. Is that even a word? Depth? Depth and texture. You can run it up above your ground line a little bit so it looks like maybe there's a little bush there. Or you could do something like this and make grass. I'm kind of a fan of the more randomy looking bushes, so that's how I'm going to leave mine. Little darker green here and there. As long as you're doing this while it's wet, those colors are going to blend together, or the different shades of green are going to blend together, so that you get kind of that mottled effect. If it starts to dry, just get your brush a little wet and come back with some more water. There we go. There is our grass. Now, while the grass is drying, I want to play around a little bit with lifting off some of the paint, because I want to have some interesting spots to play with rather than just drawing designs on top. So I'm going to zoom you in a little bit. I'm going to do it first on this blue because I think it's going to do it the best there. You can usually see it the best with darker colors. My brush is clean and wet, so I'm going to come back and just wet a spot here and there. And I'm going to rinse my brush off before I do it over here because I don't want that blue to carry over. And then I'm going to dry off my brush on my sleeve. Paper towels if you don't want to do it on your sleeve. And I'm going to come back with a clean, dry brush and just run my brush through there a time or two. If the color's really dark like this blue, you might have to rinse it and dry it again and come back and do it again. But hopefully you can see how it's lifting up that color. That's going to leave me a lighter spot to play with. I'm going to do the same thing here. Rinsing my brush off in between, drying it off so it's clean and dry. And I'm just swiping it through that spot. And as I swipe it through, because it's dry, the brush, it's picking up that wet paint. So it's kind of a fun way after you put your paint down. Maybe if you wanted to make polka dots, you could make polka dots. I'm going to do the same thing right here. Now you'll notice right here, I was just kind of scrubbing my brush a little bit instead of swiping it. It's because I was making a smaller spot. It does the exact same thing. As long as your brush is clean and dry and you're wiping it over wet paint, that will work. So you can do that wherever you want to. Put as many spots on your elephant, get them a little bit wet, clean your brush, dry it off, come back and drag it through, clean it, dry it off. Now hopefully you can see the difference here. It's much easier to see on a darker paint than it is on the lighter yellow, but it is getting a little bit lighter there. So that's what I want it to do. There we go. So put a few spots like that where you're just kind of lightening up the paint wherever you want them on your elephant. And it's going to look like a hot mess until we add, until we add the magic of a pen. So at this point, after you've added a couple of spots, again, set it aside to dry if you need to, or go hit it with the blow dryer and dry it again. And then we'll come back and start embellishing with the pen, okay? Oops, sorry, I was zoomed in. You couldn't see what I did with the purple. Well, let me show you that again. So over here on the purple, I was talking about I wasn't scooping the paint like I did over here. I came back, get it a little bit wet, come back with a clean, dry brush, and I was just rubbing it in circles. Clean it off, rub it in circles. Every time you do it, it takes off a little more paint. So instead of just swiping it through, because this was a smaller area, wiping it in circles does the exact same thing. Okay, so let's go dry these and we'll be back in a minute. All right, so we're back. Everything's dry. So we need to start adding some embellishments, and I'm going to do that with my Sharpie. I'm going to do it with a white pen. I may, I was talking to you about the silver and gold pens at the beginning. I may use a little bit of silver and gold. We'll just have to see. And then I am also going to probably use some crayons on this. These are watercolor crayons, but you could absolutely use regular, Crayola type crayons as well. This is just what I happen to have handy right here next to me, and I didn't feel like going and digging the Crayolas out of the box. they're going to give you the same type of line quality, which is a thicker line than a pen's going to do. So it gives some visual interest there by having different thicknesses of lines and things. But the first thing I want to do is outline my elephant and outline my eye and get my eye started. Those of you who've watched others of the animal videos with me know that it always looks kind of weird till you get that eye started, and the eye really kind of gives it some life. So let's zoom in, because I'm going to do something a little different on the outline on this one than we've done on some of the other creatures that we've done. I'm going to just outline the eye in black for right now, just so we've got, you know, kind of that placeholder there. And remember that when you're outlining, that gives you the opportunity to fix some of the spots where maybe you went out of the lines a little bit. So it cleans some of that up, which is nice. Now I'm going to start outlining the rest of my elephant, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently than we've done. I think on all the other animals we've just kind of done a solid outline and then gone back and added things to it. But I'm going to build in some character in my outline itself by making squiggly spots. So for instance, I'm going to come across the foot here, and hopefully we're on camera. There we go. Zoom in a little bit more so you can see this better. And here and there, as I'm going around, I'm just going to kind of start scribbling my pen a little bit, or making some waves here and there. And I'm just going to kind of do that randomly all the way around. And that's just going to give my elephant a little more character. There's really no right way or wrong way to do with it. You can play around with different lengths of those scribbles, different types of scribbles, whether you like the more sharp angular scribbles or the wavy scribbles. It's perfectly okay if you have both of them on the same drawing, because again, that just adds more interest. So I'm just going to continue all the way around my elephant. I got so much stuff sitting over here, I can't move my painting board. I'm just going to continue all the way around my elephant doing that same thing. If you wanted to go a little fancier than those first scribbles we did, you could do something like little curly cues. And just continue all the way around. Now, when we get up here to the trunk, remember we did something different here so we can kind of make it look like it's wrapping around. So when you get up here, go ahead and bring this all the way around. But remember that this bottom line of the trunk goes all the way in. So you get kind of to a point, and then this will be the wraparound spot. Okay? And then we're just going to continue all the way around the elephant. Making those little squiggles all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to start back over on this side and come up this side. I'm just kind of doing that same thing, making squiggles here and there. Giving him a little bit of character. I'm going to come do the ear real quick. So I've got the ear defined, that way when I'm running up against the ear for the body. I know where I'm starting and stopping. And there we go. Elephant is outlined. Now from here, I'm going to go over and outline my flowers just so I've kind of got those defined. And I'll show you what we're going to do with the stems on those to make it look like the trunk is wrapped around them. So I'm going to start by just outlining them, defining all 3 tiers. And then I'm going to draw my stems down. Now, what I'm going to do is bring these stems down so they stop at the top of the trunk. You can give them a little wiggle if you want, so they're not just straight. And then I'm going to skip over this part, and I'm going to bring them out down here. So you can see that gives it the illusion that the trunk is actually wrapped around those stems, right? Now from here, you can embellish those flowers however you want. I often like to have little sprouty things off the top. So I like to draw a couple of dots and then just some lines going to them off the top of the flowers. You don't have to have dots. You could put little stars or hearts up there. You don't have to have anything coming off the top of yours if you don't want to. And then I usually like to draw a few little leaves on here. Something like that. And that's essentially our flower. Now from here, you could continue on by adding some embellishments onto the flowers themselves if you wanted to. Like maybe you want to put a couple little lines here and there, kind of to give them the illusion maybe of being a little bit round. Something like that. You could certainly come in with a white pen. Make sure my pen's writing, and add some little white embellishments to the side. Or you could put polka dots on them or whatever you want to put on them. Everything you add to them just gives them a little more character, a little more character, a little more character. Now, if you want to come back and paint those leaves in green, certainly do that. I may do that by the time we get done. That just gave me a place to start where I wanted my leaves. So I'm going to come over and work on this eye a little bit because I hit a point where I'm looking at this and it's starting to kind of get cute and it's starting to have character, but that eye just looks like it's staring blankly at me. So I'm going to work on that eye a little bit. Give our elephant a little bit of life. So I'm going to give my elephant a pupil. I'm going to color that all in black, except for one little spot I'm going to leave white. So I'm going to color all around that little circle that I left. Sometimes I forget to leave the little circle, and I just get coloring and don't even think about it. If that happens, you can come back with a white pen and put that circle in. So if you forget to put it in, it's not the end of the world. You can always come back with a white pen and do that. So there we go. Instantly our elephant has a little bit more character. I want to give it some more character still, so I'm going to give it some eyelashes around the top. And I'm just, with little small strokes, going right across the top. How far do those eyelashes go? Completely up to you. You get to decide when to stop. Maybe stop, stand back, take a look at it. Does it look okay, or does it look like it needs more to you? If it looks like it needs more, keep going. You do it till you think you're happy with it. I am also going to come down here and give my elephant a little bit of a grin. So kind of right there. It's almost like an L shape. makes my elephant look like it's smirking a little bit. And you can see that's much better. With the eye in play, all of a sudden that character, whatever it is, has some life to it. So from here, I'm just going to set about embellishing the rest of this. And I'm going to do this like we've done on other drawings. You're going to use basic shapes and lines and whatever figures, symbols, whatever you want to put on here. I am going to play around with these light spots that we made and make them look a little bit like patches. So let me show you what I'm going to do with one of those. I think I'm actually going to do this one with a white pen because the white should show up on the dark pretty decently. So I'm just going to run my pen around that a couple of times loosely. And then I'm just going to include a few little hash marks here and there. Kind of makes it look like stitches around the patch. And then I think I'm going to come over here on one of these purple ones and do the exact same thing. So I'm just running around it loosely. And I am noticing that this white pen does not work as good as my Uniball Signo. So I am probably going to run in and grab that other pen. But hopefully you can see what I've done there. I just ran around that light spot a couple of times with the pen real loosely so the lines don't overlap each other. It looks kind of messy. And then just put a couple of little straight hash marks here and there. Let's come up and do one in black on this one because the black will show up nicely against the pink. So I'm just going to do kind of the same thing, make it messy. And then just do a couple little hash marks here and there. And I think I'm going to go do the same thing on this one up here. Now this one, because it's on the edge of the ear, I'm not going to run it all the way around. I'm going to keep it on the ear. That way it keeps some separation and definition between the ear and the rest of the elephant. If I ran it over, it would make that, it would flatten it out a little bit and make it look like, you know, maybe the ear isn't really sitting on top of the body like it should be. So for this one, I'm going to stop right at the ear edge, just like that. But I'm going to do the same thing, just put a couple little hash marks here and there, so it almost looks like stitches. Now, if you don't want to do the circles, you could make it look like a real patch. You could just do a square around it. And maybe put X's. I did a square around that one, and then I just put little tiny X's on the lines. It's just a different way to do kind of that patchy look and make it look like maybe it has stitches. And I'm going to do the same thing down here on this one. Do a square around it. Couple little X's here and there. Make it look like it's stitched on. Okay? So you can see even with just that little bit already, and I've actually got one more over here I need to do. Just with that little bit already, our character's starting to gain some personality. So we're just going to continue doing this same thing all over the elephant. I would say just make sure that nothing overlaps on the ear line. Stop it at the ear line like we did here so that it maintains the separation between the body and the ear. Okay. I want to have the trunk look like maybe there's a little ribbon wrapped around it. So over here on the trunk, I am going to start on the inside line and I'm going to kind of loop it up and over. And then off of this loop, I'm going to come like that. On this end, I'm just going to put a little V in there so that the tail looks like it's kind of split, like it's forked. And I'm going to color that in. Now, I'm going to skip the trunk, but I'm going to come straight across from where I left that and do the same thing again to make kind of like an S. I'm going to come off this side and end it right at the other point. So you can see how that starts to look like it's wrapped around the trunk. And I'm going to do one more. So where this is, I'm going to skip the trunk and come over here, but this one I'm going to go across the top. And I'm going to end it like I started it. I'm going to put a little fork on the end so it looks like a little ribbon wrapped around. So there we go. We look like we've got a ribbon wrapped around the trunk. If you wanted to, you could, oops, interesting, I moved the table and my camera thing moved and it hasn't the rest of the time. Experimenting with my camera stand. So maybe down here you want to put some polka dots. If you're going to do something like polka dots, I recommend doing them in different sizes. That gives it still just a little more personality. If you wanted to, actually I'm going to do it on this leg. On this leg, I'm going to give it some stripes. I don't think I want them to be necessarily straight across, so I'm going to do them with kind of a curve and then come back and color them in. But I think one stripe is going to be lonely, so I'm going to do another one. You could certainly do this stripe on the trunk or elsewhere on the body if you wanted. You could maybe give it stripes up here, but oh, sorry, we're zoomed in. You could maybe give it stripes up here between its rear end and the ear. Nothing wrong with that. And then maybe in between here, I'm going to put some triangles with some little dots. Okay. And I think I actually like the stripe idea, but over here I'm going to do it in white because this is a dark color, so I think the white will stand out like we did over here. Only I'm going to do this one with a crayon and see what we get for a different type of line. So I'm going to come over here and just do kind of the same thing. I'm going to draw a curved line up, and I'm going to color it in. There we go. Now hopefully you can see the difference in these lines. If you look at the black lines with the ink, they're fairly solid. The white lines, even though the pen skipped a little bit, it's still a fairly solid line. That plays into the texture on the paper more. So that's where you get some interest in using different types of things to make your lines. If you want that to be a little brighter, just come back over it and do a second coat. And I think I'm going to do another one right here. Kind of like that. And I'm going to come play around a little bit with the white on the pink. The white is not going to show up on this yellow, so I'm not even going to bother, I don't think, doing any white. Actually, I'll do it just so you can see. If I do some white down here, like maybe some white polka dots, with the camera zoomed in, you can see it, but with that zoomed out, it kind of fades into the background. But, since we're doing this, you could perhaps do a couple of them so that you've got them, and then to make them stand out more, do something like that around them, and maybe come back with the pen and put some dots in them. So certainly that's an option, even though from a distance you're not going to see the white as well. They do serve as a placeholder for those black circles, so it still adds some interest. So with all of this, we're really just kind of playing around to see what we come up with. I'm going to do a couple of squiggly lines with the white over here, just so we can see what that's like on the purple. I'm going to come up here and do some polka dots. And I think I like this with the black around them, so I'm going to do that, only I'm only going to do it once. I'm not going to do it multiple times. And I did not do it very neatly, as you can see. The whole idea of Whimsical is that we're getting away from realistic. We're getting away from perfection. We're getting away from our perception of what things should be. So messy is okay. Mottled paint is okay. Doesn't make sense is okay. Doesn't look real is okay. That's what makes Whimsical fun. Now, as I'm looking at this through my camera, even though the white does show up on these darker colors, it still looks like it's getting a little bit lost to me. So I'm just going to come back like under these white lines here and mimic those with a black line. And you can see that together you get kind of a nice contrast. The black almost makes the white stand out a little bit better. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. And maybe put just a few little lines on there. Just because. So we're going to continue doing this same thing all over this elephant until you decide it's done. When is it done? When it looks good to you. It's often helpful to, kind of set it up across the room from you. Step back a few feet, take a look at it, see if there are any spots that are calling you, telling you they need something. With where we sit right now, these two legs need something and the ear definitely needs something for me. So I'm going to do some more on there. If you're not sure, set it up against the wall, step back, take a look. Another good way to do it is to take a picture of it with your camera. It's always interesting to me because I'm watching what I'm doing here, but I'm also watching it on my camera at the same time, and how different it looks in both places. So you can also take a picture of it with your phone, take a look at that, see what areas are calling to you, all kinds of different ways to get just a different perspective on this. And if you're not sure, let somebody else look at it and see what they think. Now, I will caution you with that. Everybody has different taste. Some people like a more minimal look. Some people like, really busy and fun. I tend to like the busier look. If I showed this to, I have one friend who is quite minimalistic. If I showed it to her, she's going to say, no, that's already too much already. So while it can be helpful to ask people sometimes, do keep in mind that everybody has different tastes. So even if somebody says, no, it's done, don't do anything else. If you still feel like it needs something else, keep going. Okay. I am also going to come down and do some things down here on my ground line. Which I will talk about in just a minute. But for right now, I think I'm going to speed up my video. So while I'm filling in the rest of these, you guys do the same thing. Just start putting basic shapes, lines, symbols, whatever you want, wherever you think they should go on your elephant. Okay? If you like, the circles, maybe you want to do circles on the whole thing. If you like the lines, maybe you do that on each leg, or, do it across the ear, or give it an earring, something like that. You just keep going with whatever embellishments you think you want to put on there until you think it's done. Okay, so I'm going to speed us up, do some more on here, and then we'll come back and talk about this ground line, and then we will also finish off some of this white space in the back. Okay. Okay, I think I have gone about as far as I'm going to go with my little elephant. And you can see some of the different things I did on there. None of them are really very complicated. They're all basic shapes. Circles, hearts, stars. Made it look like there's some little dangly things down there. I came back and put some little squiggles off the side of my elephant here and there, some hash lines just to make him not look quite so flat. When you do things like this that start in the design and come out, it kind of gives it a little more of a 3D impression. So I think I'm going to call it good there. I did come back and give my elephant a little tail. So now I'm going to address this ground line because our elephant is looking kind of finished and this is not. So I'm not going to get too carried away with this ground line. I am going to come down and just kind of make maybe some little grass shapes here and there. And I'm going to do that kind of around the feet, like here on this one. That way, again, we're adding a little more of the idea of three-dimensional in there, that he's standing behind this clump of grass. So you can do that wherever you want to on your feet. And for those grass clumps, I'm just kind of scribbling my pen back and forth. Where I had blobbed a bunch of paint here and I wanted it to kind of look like a bush, I'm not going to do anything terribly complicated. I'm just doing little C's to kind of make it look like there's something there. If you want to, you can run a line across where your ground line is. I would not make it a solid line though. Kind of skip it here and there, like this, so that it's not really defined. And what that does is just kind of give it a little looser, whimsical look. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing over here that I did with the other bush. I'm not going to define it real strictly. I'm just going to do some little squiggles so it looks like there's something there. And then I might come down, you know, towards the bottom and do kind of the same thing. Maybe a few little squiggles so that it looks like there's a little bit of grass here and there, or another little bush. If you wanted to put some little flowers coming out, certainly you could do that. Completely up to you. I'm not going to do a whole lot down here though, because I don't want it to interfere with my elephant. I still want this to be the primary focus. So at this point, we're doing pretty good with this. We just need to add a little bit of something in the background so that we don't have, you know, kind of stark white back there, unless you like that. Certainly keep in mind, as I'm suggesting these things, they're all just suggestions. If you like yours the way it looks with the white background, absolutely leave it that way. But I am going to add a little something to here because I want to show you what that does for the appearance of depth. So now that I've got everything else done, I am going to come back with just a little bit of a lightish blue. I just want a hint of something back here. I don't want it to be really intense. So I know, pardon my arm, I know that the palette that I'm using has a really intense blue. So I'm going to use just a little bit of it. I'm not really running my brush around my palette, you know, really scrubbing it in there really heavily. I put some water in there and I'm just kind of tipping my brush on there, just lightly run it across the tip because I don't want a ton of it. If you're not sure how much you have, dot it on a piece of paper first so you can get an idea what you've really got going there. And I'm just going to kind of come in and scribble some of that in here and there. And I want it to be really light like this. There will be a few spots that are a little bit darker. So I've got some contrast. And then I'm going to just kind of take some plain water and just kind of scribble it around and work it around. And you can see how light that is there. That's what I'm going for. I don't want anything terribly dark like that. If you do that, rinse your brush off and come back real quick and start with water, just kind of spreading it out. So then I'm going to take and put some of that up there. And this is still pretty dark, so I'm going to come back and grab some more of it and move it around. Remembering to be careful as you get close to your other colors so you don't re-wet them. And I'm just going to keep coming back to this and using water to spread that around so that it lightens up that dark blob that I put on there. And I did that deliberately because I wanted to show you how to fix that, because it's a common thing, especially if you're working straight from your palette. And that's why some people don't like to have you work straight from the palette because of that. But I want to show you how to fix that, because I happen to like to work straight from my palette, and other people I know do too. So when you're doing that, it's hard to tell, you know, just how hard you're running your brush through the paint, how much you're picking up. So if you do get too much like that, just keep rinsing your brush off, come back with more water. You can do the trick we did over here to make these lighter spots. Come back with a dry brush and just wipe it through and pull some of it back off. So I'm just going to kind of keep doing that same thing, dotting some paint around, coming back with plain water, getting it wet and just smushing it around. I am going to touch up against my elephant here and there and not in other spots, so that this is not going to be a solid background. I don't want it to be solid. I just want it to have a little bit of color. And I think that I'm about happy with that. Like I said, I don't want it really, really, really dark. I just want it to have a hint of color. So you can put as little or as much as you want on there. Do be sure that you're not ignoring these spots down here. Put a little bit of color down here too. Otherwise, we have color up here that looks like a background and nothing here, and it looks funny. So I am going to just come back with just a little bit here and there, down in these spots as well, so that we've got just a hint of color. Again, being careful where you're running right up against the elephant, that you're not getting into the colors on the elephant, so that we're not re-wetting them and dragging them down into our other colors. If you do want to paint your leaves green on your flowers, absolutely, this would be a good time to do that. And I'm just going to drop a little tiny bit of green in there. I'm not going really, really dark on them. And I think I'm going to put just a little hint of red down here in my flower as well. And there we go. If you wanted to at this point, if you like the look of splotched color, we've done this in the past in a couple other videos where we get really wet paint and then just kind of tap it on so that you've got splotches in the background. This would be a good time to do that as well. Maybe I'll do that here just to show you. So what I'm doing is I'm picking the paint that I want to use for my splatters, and I'm going to put a little bit of it over here on my lid, because I want to really water this down. I don't want it to be really, really dark. So I put a little bit of that paint over here just by running my brush through the paint and then running my brush over here. And I'm getting it all over the place. Come all over on this side. Come on. And then I'm just adding more water to it by dipping my brush in the water and running it through that paint. So I get it really inky, and then I'm going to come back and just make little splatters here and there. I am trying to be careful not to get it all over my elephant, but you can see I did get one there, and that's okay. One here and there isn't going to hurt anything. So there we go. I'm not going to get too carried away with my splatters because my elephant's kind of busy and I don't want the background to be too terribly busy. But certainly you could do that if you wanted to do it with a different color instead of the blue to match what I guess I would think of as maybe sky behind it. You could certainly do it with a different color. There's no rhyme or reason to the color I chose. It just happened to be the one I was looking at. And there we go. I think we're going to call our elephant finished at that. There we go. So hopefully you enjoyed that one. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you are enjoying these videos, remember that I would love for you to subscribe, like the videos, comment on them. I love to hear how you guys are doing as you're trying these. So Please comment on the videos if you've got questions or just want to let me know how you're doing with it. I'm happy to answer questions, and I love to hear what you're creating. If you do want to follow some of my other art adventures, I am on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest. I am most active on Instagram and Pinterest. I'm at Painted Willow Art on all three of those. Pinterest is kind of fun because I do pin lots of ideas like this. So if you like this type of painting, you can go on Pinterest and find all kinds of other animals that you can do. Certainly what I show you here, like I mentioned before, is just a jumping off point. As you see other animals you want to try or other things, I think next time we're going to do a flower. You know, certainly give them a try. The whole idea with these is just playing and having fun. So give it a go. If you don't like the way it turns out, you don't have to show it to anybody. You can always try it again. So with that, I will bid you good afternoon. It's afternoon where I am. Don't know what time it is where you are, but the sentiment is still the same. I hope it's good for you, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks, everybody. Okay, this is a PS to the video because I completely forgot I tried this new tape and I didn't tell you how it worked. It worked really good at holding my paper down. It didn't want to peel itself away, but the true test is peeling it off. And because I've never used this tape, I am going to follow the same rule that I always follow and that I generally tell you all about. When you're peeling your tape off, don't come straight down or towards your painting. Peel it at an angle away from your painting. That way, if it does decide to rip the paper, it's going to rip this way. It won't rip into your painting. So we're kind of zoomed in here a little bit. Hopefully you can see this is coming off nice and clean. I'm kind of happy with this. Let me zoom you back out so we can see the bottom line. This one for me is going to kind of tell the tale because I used a good bit of water up against the tape down here. There wasn't as much here. So what I'm hoping is that the tape did a good job of sealing this off, and that when I pull it off, you're not going to see all these little places where it looks like it bled through. Hopefully that's on top of the tape. I'm hoping for a really clean line across the bottom. So let's see what we got. Oops. Come on, tape. Alrighty. So here's the thing. Let me pull the rest of this off real quick. I do like that it's coming off nice and clean. It's not sticking to the paper at all. Coming off, meaning it's not ripping the paper. And I'm pretty tickled about that. I think for that reason, I will probably do some more experimenting with this tape because I'm really happy with the fact that it's not ripped the paper at all. Okay, come on. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so to show you that bottom, where I was hoping down here I didn't get any bleed through because I used a good bit of water, and so for me that was going to kind of be the test on how this works, and you can see it did bleed through. However, I think part of that might have to do with the paper. As you can see, my paper has a pretty good texture on it, so it's hard to get a good seal with any tape across that texture. It did bleed a little bit more than my washi tape does. However, I don't think it's terrible. Normally, I'm going to mat this before I do anything with it, so the mat is going to cover that white space. And if I didn't want to mat it, the bleed through is pretty small, so I could come back with a white paint pen and just go over those bleeds with a white paint pen and clean them right up, and you'd never know the difference. So I think that was a pretty successful experiment with that tape. So there you go. There was my PS. I forgot to tell you about how the tape worked. So with that, I'll see y'all next time. Thanks.